are listening to the 170 Podcast, a podcast that sparks conversations on relatable issues that cut across a person's life and lifestyle from a lifespan perspective. I am Czarru.
And I'm Jay. In today's episode, we will talk about the challenges and concerns faced by lesbian, gay, and bisexual adolescents.
So, it's about adolescence pala today, Jay. Adolescent ka pa ba?
May tawag ba dun sa in denial na adolescent? Parang, I still want to be an adolescent. Pero, I think some acceptance needs to be made.
I think may tawag dyan.
Ano?
Delulu ba yan?
Ano ba yan? Ang theme ba natin for today is to call me out.
Ano ba? Hindi tayo ganun kasi wholesome pala tong podcast na to.
Tama.
But anyway, when we talk about teenagers, a lot of people consider it as a stressful period para dun mismo sa teenagers or sa adolescents and even para sa families nila.
Yeah, for me din from what I remember from my adolescence. Yes, inamin na hindi na adolescent.
All about us kasi to,
Tama,
diba?
it's just about me, charot. But I remember nga, it was a very stressful period. You know, you had your academics and then parang there's this struggle na I want to be my own person pero syempre your parents don't want to give you that parang autonomy. At least in my experience. How about you, Czarru?
For me naman, siguro my being an introvert played a part na rin, pero I was kinda super soft during my adolescent years. Parang behaved, if I'd call it that, but at the same time, parang chill lang. So, I guess it shows na we can all have different experiences. For others, siguro mas intense. Wow, intense ba yun
Intense?
sa'yo?
Sige, tawagin lang natin intense for lack of a better word. Sige, intense na lang.
Intense. But for others, yan, mas chill, ganyan.
True. Ayan, but before we proceed to the main part of today's episode, we actually took a short test kanina related to this topic. Di ba, Czarru?
Yes. Very, very short test. And we took the Kinsey scale, which can be used to explore or siguro figure out one's sexuality. So before we reveal the results that we got, Jay, can you tell us more about sexual orientation?
Yes, may pa-suspense. Anyway, seriously talking. So, sexual orientation was described as a construct that refers to whether a person's physical and emotional arousal is to people of the same or opposite sex. So, sexual activity is separate from sexual orientation and one is not dependent on the other. While more terms exist to describe the sexual orientation of people, the following identified terms are the most common. So, the term heterosexual is used to refer to individuals attracted to the opposite sex, and the terms gay and lesbian to those attracted to the same sex. The term bisexual naman refers to those attracted to both sexes, pero there have been a lot of labels and certain identities that have come in recent times. Kasi people are starting to find out more and more about their identities. Hindi lang siya nare-restrict dun sa labels na yun, no?
Yeah, madami talaga. Pero siguro for today, yung tatlo lang na yun, gay, lesbian, and bisexual, yung pagtutuunan natin ng pansin para mas simple para sa ating mga listeners. But to all you out there na nakikinig and you think you want to explore more, dapat hanapin nila kung ano yan.
Take your time in exploring. Don't rush. Pero we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of that later on.
Yes, that is right. So going back to the test, ayan, would you like to go first ba in sharing, Jay?
Bina-volunteer mo na naman ako, Czarru. Fine. Okay, yan. So, the Kinsey scale is on 0 to 7, if I remember correctly. And, surprise, I got a 3, which is straight in the middle. That's not surprising to me. The first time I took it, when I was still exploring my sexuality, yun na talaga agad. Yung score na nakuha ko. May unting surprise na hanggang ngayon, yun pa rin yung score na nakuha ko. But then, I guess, affirming my identity as a bisexual person. Ikaw ba, Czarru? What's your score?
So, pag 3, bisexual yung makukuha?
Yes. Actually, yung term nila was equally attracted to the same and opposite sex. Which, I don't know if it would be that clear-cut for me. Pero, sige, let's go with that for simplicity for right now.
Yung sa akin naman, yung nakuha ko is at the far end of it.
Yes.
So, it says na I am exclusively attracted to people of the same sex.
Yes. Be proud.
Be proud. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Surprising ba yung result? Para sa akin, surprising ba yung akin?
Parang pinaput mo ako on the spot.
Amay?
Sabihin na lang natin, hindi. Pero, I don't think that's something to be ashamed of naman. I think you're very proud naman, di ba?
I am. Happy Pride, mga
Happy
kababayan.
Pride.
Okay, anyway, sige.
Ayan. So, you know, it's nice that we can talk about this nga in the open like this, no? We can make jokes. Kasi for some people, I guess even for us at some point, being open about it, it's a challenge.
Yes, and it can get really stressful for adolescents who do not identify as heterosexual. Kasi a lot of people expect them to like come out, as in i-announce or i-broadcast sa sambayanan yung sexual identity or sexual orientation that they identify with. And you know, nakaka-stress yun for some people.
Yeah, even yung coming out, it shouldn't be taken for granted. You know, it's heteronormative. We expect everyone who hasn't come out to be cisgender, to be heterosexual. Because you have to announce not being cisgender and heterosexual. It's a stressful process and it's rooted in the fact that our society is very heteronormative.
Yeah, no? Kasi by heteronormative, kasi ibig sabihin ito na ang default natin ay yung pagiging straight, right?
Yeah.
So, we're trying to break free from that para mabigyan natin ng chance yung mga people na hindi naman nag-identify as straight. And, you know, coming from a developmental standpoint, the development of sexual orientation naman kasi, kung ano man yung sexual orientation mo, it commonly happens during the adolescent years, which is why the issues of coming to terms with your own SO or sexual orientation, ayan na nga, coming out to your family and friends, and pati na rin yung pag-express ng sexuality mo, no? These are all central to the lives of adolescents. More specifically to those na, again, hindi nag-identify as heterosexual.
Yeah, from that line of thought, no, it really sounds difficult and it's unfair for adolescents who aren't straight kasi what they're going through, it's a normal part of their personal and identity development. Pero kasi yung sexuality nila, na-view as hindi siya yung norm, hindi siya cisgender, hindi siya heterosexual. Even if it is perfectly normal on all fronts, they have to go through more challenges, more stress siguro.
Yeah, do you think that's unfair, Jay?
I think so. Kasi adolescence is already a stressful time, no? We don't need to add on to that pa. You're trying to figure yourself out, but then society is telling you that what you have figured out is wrong. I think it's unfair talaga.
Yeah, and medyo counterproductive din, no? At mamaya pag-uusapan natin kung bakit naging counterproductive para sa mga LGB adolescents yung ganitong situation. Which is why we are having this conversation today, because even if people have become more open to issues related to, sexual orientation, isama na rin natin ang gender identity at gender expression or SOGI, yung SOGI as a whole is not yet fully accepted. Medyo mahirap pa para sa mga taong pag-usapan ito, unawain ito, at mas lalo nang tanggapin ito in all its, variety.
All its inner workings.
Inner workings, wow! But yes, no? So people may still find some difficulty in tackling this topic.
That's right. Pero in case hindi nyo pa nami-feel from the vibes of this podcast, Czarru and I are very motivated to go about this, especially about sexual orientation for today's episode. So, we've talked about how the development of sexuality is more difficult for LGB youth. But what exactly nga ba yung challenges na nafe-face nila?
So what are the challenges they face? Medyo madami, no? Hindi natin mailalatag lahat ng pinagdadaanan nila. Pero we will zoom in on a few in today's episode. Kaya number one dyan, syempre, no, LGB youths, no, lesbian, gay, and bisexual youths may experience identity confusion kasi they may face several barriers that prevent them from coming to terms with their identity in relation to their sexual orientation. Kailangan kasi nating maintindihan na sa usapin ng sexual orientation, part ito, no, malaking bahagi ito ng identity ng isang tao. Hindi lang to basta, SO, straight ka ba or hindi ka ba straight? May implications kasi siya di ba, Jay?
Tama. Hindi siya yung, I don't know if people have seen this meme going around online where people are like, well, don't make your sexuality part of your identity or that's all that you are. But it's a big part of what you are. It's a big part of how you go about society, how you go about your interactions. Hindi mo yung matatanggal sa identity mo.
Yeah, and parang, paano ba yun na, wag mong gawing personality
Wag
yung
mo
sexuality
ipakita
mo.
na
Wag
ano
mo
ka.
ipakita, identity mo nga sexual orientation mo nga siya. So, medyo contradictory yung ganung claims. But, I hope today maintindihan ng listeners natin na it is a very important part of developing their identity.
Tama. Yeah, kasi Well, ikaw ba? When did you figure it out? Kasi I remember it really was, once I figured it out, I was like, oh my gosh, I've understood a big part of myself. Parang, ito yung part siya na something na I finally understand about myself. Yung nawala na yung sense of confusion. Yun nga, adolescence is like that time where you figure out who you are. And it was a big part na parang, okay, yeah, this is part of me. And until now, it's still a big part of me. I didn't grow out of it. It's not a phase. So, yeah, I think we should really shed like light on how important it is talaga.
Yeah. And of course, to teach others as well to embrace kung ano man yung identity that they come to. See, individuals would usually realize their sexual orientation by noticing that they experience attraction to the same sex. No? So, for example, ako, as a guy, I noticed na I'm attracted pala to guys din.
Guys din ba? And then you just figured out na. As your results suggest, you figured it out down the line?
I figured out down the line that it's exclusively for guys pala.
Tama. But yeah, no, I relate to that. Like, as someone born female, like, I realized, like, later on, sabi ko, I wouldn't mind kissing my friends who are girls. And then I realized na parang, wait lang, is that a very straight thing to like think about? And then I realized ko, I would want to try dating them. I would want to try dating them like I date guys at that time. So yeah, it was a big part nga parang, oh wait, this attraction that I'm feeling, it might be something else. Doon na nag-start yung pag-search sa Google. What does it mean if I'm attracted to my friend who is a girl and I'm also a girl? So yeah, it's a very confusing time talaga.
And really, that's part of how people develop their sexual orientation. No? They realize that they could be different from other people. Na medyo iba sila, na baka hindi quote-unquote normal, no? Yung nararamdaman nila. Pero even by going through a sexual experience nga, people also figure out na doon nila nakikita na may attraction pala sila for people of the same sex or of the opposite sex.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, we're focusing on adolescents today, but people figure out their identities at different ages and they're all completely valid. But yeah, there are different ways, different experiences. Although may pagka-same yung experiences natin and how we found out, some people may find out in different ways. Nothing wrong with that. Find out how you want to find out as long as you're safe doing it.
Yeah, but the less than good part of this discovery, of noticing their SO, is that they also become aware of various barriers, na napapansin na nila, nagiging aware sila of the stigma attached to homosexuality, yung mga inaccurate knowledge na alam or na pinapanindigan ng iba, the lack of role models, the lack of visibility for these people who identify as such, and the minimal opportunity to socialize with other youths who are having similar feelings. Parang mahirap kasi mag-socialize openly kapag bago mo palang nare-realize na hindi ka straight eh.
And how do you figure that out? How do you start that conversation? Especially kung iniisip mo lahat ng friends mo straight in the first place. How would you start na parang, oh, by the way, I'm not.
By the way, she's gonna slay. But...
Exactly. By the way, you might not know this about me, but I'm fruity. Joke. Pero, yeah, it's hard kasi, example, like lack of role models, like you said. Sino ba yung nakikita natin growing up, or at least in my personal experience, wala akong nakita growing up na someone who was proud to be bisexual or like said na, oh, I'm bisexual, I experience attraction to both men and women. Like, yung parating talaga on like popular media especially is once you like the same sex ka na lang talaga and your transition into the opposite sex, it's a confusing thing for people if walang role models in media or if walang education, like you said. And yeah, you tend to think na, but I don't fit these stereotypes na I see, na the only ones that are available. And then you question talaga, tama ba to? Tama ba yung naramdaman ko?
And when adolescents go through that experience, or go through these thoughts, they may respond to their sexual orientation with rejection and avoidance. Kasi nakikita nila na, ay, baka negative itong identity na pinagdadaanan ko, For example, terms like bakla or tomboy, right? They have negative connotations because they are too frequently used in name-calling and ridicule.
Hindi naman tayo lahat like stranger dun sa fact na yun, na yung bakla, tomboy, talagang insulto siya when you were growing up. Na pag, if a girl was like doing sports and maybe hindi nag-aayos, siguro they'd say, oh, tomboy ka. Or like if a guy was feminine, laging, oh, bakla ka pala eh. an unfortunate reality, and it makes it harder for people to come to terms nga with their sexual orientation. I mean, personally, I remember na once I did start to figure out na, oh, I might be bi, parang there was a long time talaga, siguro like around a month, na I was like, but I can't be kasi the connotations of these are so negative. I don't have like anyone to look up to that is positive about this. My parents certainly aren't positive about this, and my friends have not started this conversation. So, mahirap siya i-accept. There's a lot of struggle talaga na unnecessary dapat.
Yeah, yeah. And okay, this one, medyo mas mabigat siya na topic. But in reality kasi another barrier that comes no to accepting one's identity is religion. Kasi faith is deeply and widely woven no, into the Filipino culture and identity. And I think it's good kasi madaming magandang naidudulot yan. And people find great belongingness in the churches that they belong to. But it's just that sometimes it can also be ayun nga, a barrier. Kasi involvement with, or rather, when people are involved no, in a religious group, it yields positive outcomes for adolescents. Pero it's not always the case because sometimes it contributes to forming negative attitudes towards same-sex like couples or marriages kasi hindi yun yung paano ba? Hindi yun yung conventional na ipinipresent.
It doesn't fit the heteronormative society nga, di ba? I mean, personally, I grew up religious. My mother was very religious. And so, I grew up religious kasi siya lang naman din yung kasama ko halos sa bahay. And yeah, I definitely can remember from my experience, unfortunately, na noong time na where we were in high school nung in-announce ng US na same-sex marriage is legalized. And I remember feeling negative about it. And I was like, well, okay, I mean, they can do it, but I'm not ever going to do that because it's a sin. And well, at least sa akin, may degree of acceptance. But I remember from like more religious peers din, hindi siya acceptance talagang like it was straight up na, oh, this is a sin. Oh, this is wrong. Like, they shouldn't be doing that. And yes, those people aren't going to hear it. Like people in America getting like married, like getting into same-sex marriages, they're not going to hear it. But our friends, even ourselves, who parang maybe thinking na we may be attracted to the same sex, we're the ones who hear it. We're the ones who take it to heart and think na, oh, it's negative talaga even for my friends. It's not just my family na maybe at that time may struggle na kayo sa family, di ba? It's even your friends are sharing it. So yeah, it's a big source of conflict. Kasi yun nga, like I said, growing up religious, even attending mass, you would hear that sentiment from homilies na this is a work of the devil, this is a sin. So, it's a hard thing to work with, especially in a religious country like the Philippines, no?
Yeah, and for individuals, for adolescents who identify as LGB, paano kung sila din mismo religious? Siguro it's gonna cause more confusion for them na mag-identify as someone beyond the traditional man and woman mold.
Yeah, and well, speaking from experience, ang mahirap din is you want to keep being religious siguro. Some people do find comfort, like you said, in being religious or in having a secure attachment to their religion. Pero meron ding want to be accepting of your identity. You're Soji. And if hindi siya heterosexual, how do you manage that? Paano ka magiging good na part ng religion na yun, good member ng church, while also being, you know, not straight, not heterosexual. You're either homosexual or you're bisexual. It's a hard thing to navigate talaga. Personally, I know it took me years to figure out how that worked into my identity. And I don't wish it on anyone talaga, that struggle.
And that is definitely a tension, no? Like, that people have to constantly grapple with para, ayun nga, ma-accept no, or ma-settle nila sa kanilang mga sarili ang sexual orientation nila at papaano ito lumulugar sa kanilang overall na pagkatao o identity. And, you know, relating this to the bigger idea here no, of accepting and forming their identity, individuals may reject and avoid recognizing their sexual orientation. And they may rationalize this by banking on the stability or perhaps instability of SO. Kagaya to nung nasabi mo kanina na baka phase lang naman ito. Kasi maaaring magbago siya in the future. At sinasabi nila na, okay, kung ganito man yung attraction na pinagdadaanan ko ngayon, perhaps in the future, this is also going to pass, this is also going to fade. And they use this nga to rationalize no, or to reject their sexual orientation.
Yeah, well, especially in bisexuality, a lot of, well, when I came out, a lot of the comments were, well, that's just a phase, or everyone goes through that naman, no? And even at one point, naisip ko, baka nga, everyone does go through it. Like, if even your parents and even, like, your older relatives are saying, we experienced that too, you're like, oh, but they're in seemingly heterosexual relationships, and they don't identify as something different from heterosexual. So, mapaisip ka talaga.
Baka nga phase lang.
Oo, baka nga face lang. Baka tama yung sinasabi nila. I just read too much stuff on the internet. Baka it doesn't apply to someone like me who is Filipino. Baka iba yung experience ko. Baka I'm just being influenced by Western influences. It's a lot. It's a lot of things to navigate, a lot of things to be secure in your identity na hindi, ganito talaga ako. Mahirap mo pa siya maabot. Hindi mo siya maabot agad, especially figuring it out.
And academic literature really suggests naman na it is possible for people to change, no, or to move, there is some fluidity or flexibility in a person's sexual orientation. Pero at the end of the day, infrequent ito. Hindi madalas na nagbabago o pabago-bago ang sexual orientation. Kaya kung ano yung nararamdaman mo, greater yung chance na ito na talaga yung sexual orientation na meron ka.
Yeah, well, it's a big part talaga, no? It's, wala, ang daming issues, daming kailangan i-consider. One of the things na i-consider din is yung family relationships mo, diba? Like you said, coming out, that entire process. Kasi yung relationships managed by an individual, it's a critical factor in adolescence. And family, hindi natin madi-deny na it's very important for adolescents. And in as much as they can be a source of support, pwede din kasi siyang source of concern, yung conflicts na we have with our family. Would you say, Bal and Czarru, na you felt na they increased during adolescence?
Para sa akin, more than conflict itself, mas naranasan ko na parang I needed more space, ganyan. Tumataas yung autonomy needs ko from my family. And thankfully, hindi naman siya nag-translate into conflict, pero I can totally understand how people could feel tension within their household during adolescence. And lalo na kung may identity issues ka pa related to sexual orientation, baka nga mas mabigat, no? At mas ma-exacerbate o mas mapalala yung conflicts na pinagdadaanan mo with your parents, for example, especially if hindi sila accepting.
Tama, kasi yung tensions na meron sa identity confusions and even yung coming out, extremely challenging siya for an adolescent. Especially if negative yung magiging response. For example, like, I don't know if you've had experiences, pero yung takot talaga na once you do come out, your parents are going to say, we don't want that, we don't want this in our house. Either you change or you get out. Like, it's such a terrifying prospect to think about. Kasi, anday mo na lang, let's say you have like issues with friends, issues with relationships, issues at school, and then you have to think about, are they going to kick me out kasi I figured out like my identity? Like, ang hirap niyang maging concern pa. Like, dagdag stress talaga. It's not just a little like stress, it's a big source of stress to grapple with the fact na, am I going to be homeless because I'm honest about my identity?
And when a person or an individual's family kasi reject yung coming out nila, minsan hindi naman siya, or maaaring meron talagang part of them na may prejudice laban sa mga LGB individuals, pero minsan meron ding worry sa part nila na dahil hindi quote-unquote, hindi quote-unquote normal yung identity or sexual orientation ng tao, natatakot sila na baka the society as a whole would give their child a hard time. So sila na mismo pipigil dun sa child nila para hindi niya pagdaanan yung mga ganon.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that sentiment, yung ako na magsasabi sa'yo kasi yun na naman din iisipin ng society. So I'm protecting you now. Might as well ako na yung magsimula na magsabi sa'yo na you shouldn't do this kasi ikaw lang mahirapan in the long run. Pero yeah, it's the reaction of one's parents or one's guardians, yung primary caretakers, it's a big thing to think about. So, some adolescents, they may proceed with disclosing their SO in a more stepwise fashion. So, pwedeng kapatid if they do have siblings, or cousins if yung close sila sa cousins sila. Ako, I know I'm close with my cousins. Pero that's what they do. They talk to these people before they forward it to their parents kasi parang rehearsal na din siya. This is how I will start that heavy conversation. This is how I will deal with kung ano man yung magiging reaction nila. I know me, personally, I talk to my younger sister before I came to my parents. Kasi, yun nga, I did want that rehearsal. Like, I did want, if ever I didn't have the courage to bring it up to my parents, at least someone in the family, at least I had some sort of familial support. Ikaw ba, Zal?
For me, ito, na-experience ko din siya kasi mas naging open ako sa friends ko, sa partner ko, before I brought it sa bahay.
Yeah. It's, at least may rehearsal, no?
Yeah,
at
it
least
helps.
may practice.
It helps a lot.
Yeah, kasi, parang nakakuha mo yung, okay, pag ganito yung reaction nila, alam ko na yung gagawin.
It gives courage, especially if positive yung reactions na makukuha mo from the other people that you come out to first.
Tama. Yun kasi, pag yung outcome ng coming out in yung family, unfavorable siya, yung distress kasi nararamdaman ng isang individual, damaging talaga siya. It's so harmful for someone talaga to deal with. After all, the support and acceptance of the family, they're strong predictors of the adolescent self-acceptance. And yung self-acceptance ng peers din nila, important din kasi siya for the adolescent. So, pag hindi ka tanggap ng parent mo, how would you feel supported to accept yourself? How would you think na your friends would also be accepting of you, di ba? Parang, nagagamit mo siya as predictor, nagagamit mo siya as, oh, this means na dapat hindi ko na siguro i-bring up to more people or dapat baka mali talaga, baka I need to change talaga, di ba?
Yeah, and that also works the other way around na if sa peers ka muna unang nag-come out and negative yung reaction nila, pwedeng ayaw mo na siyang dalhin to your family. Or again, if ayaw ng family mo, baka mas mag-hesitate ka to open up to your peers.
Yeah, but like you mentioned nga din is yung isang concern nga din is yung social aspect ng ating SO. It's a big deal and different siya from heterosexual practices. Like, may dating, for example, like how do you bring that up, as someone who's bisexual? How do you bring up to your potential partner that, oh, I'm also attracted to the other sex too? Do you disclose it? Mahirap siya na thing to think about. Maybe your friends, they're going on dating apps, they're finding their potential partner, but then you have to think, will they accept me if they find out about my identity? Is this identity in the first place right, diba? It's a lot of things to think about.
And when it comes to romantic relationships, sometimes hindi mo rin sure if ano ba yung sexual orientation ng tao na you're attracted to. Like,
Tama.
will they be accepting of you or sa ibang sexual orientation or sa ibang tao ba sila attracted?
Or do they also have grapples with their own identity na parang they don't accept na they are siguro a certain label and dahil, because of that, they might not be like parang kinder to you about it. Pero ayun, hindi na naman din kasi sa friends and family. You also have yung effect ng school. So yung presence ng LGBT affirmative na school organization, support from teachers and the school. Syempre, better yung mental health outcomes. Yun yung pinapakita na studies. And we understand why that would be better for yung mental health ng mga LGBTQ adolescents or LGBTQ youth. Kasi that's another aspect of support that you're getting. Kasi if you don't have that aspect of support, if your school is telling you din na mali, if for example, for more like outward na expressions of your sexual identity, if you grow out your hair, if you're found holding hands with a boy, if you're also like a guy, pag hindi din okay yung support doon, dagdag stress na naman. Parang dagdag stress na sa family, dagdag stress sa friends, and then you have to worry about yung social aspects sa school, hindi lang yung academics mo.
And this brings us to the bigger idea na the social aspect of your life is very crucial talaga to living, say, a healthy and successful adolescence. And, navigating relationships with peers, kagaya nga nung nabanggit kanina, can really be quite the high hurdle. Kasi again, nandyan ang stigma, nandyan yung iba't ibang challenges to socialization. And speaking of stigma, one prominent source of LGBT stigma stems from issues related to health, And this is the third factor na pag-uusapan natin today. So, pinag-usapan natin yung identity, yung family, and now we're moving on to health.
Yeah, kasi that's something that we talked about in our classes, as psych majors. Intersectionality, it's a big concept na laging present sa mga classes natin. And yung access to health that is affirmative in the first place, that's a big factor to your mental health and your physical health na din siguro na heterosexual individuals may take for granted kasi they're already guaranteed that, Parang people will be accepting of your sexual identity kasi that's the norm. Pero once you open up about something that's not the norm, baka isipin na, oh, the doctor will treat me differently. Or, for example, like in counseling, in my experience, baka hindi sila maging accept and they'll try to like cure this as well kasi they view it as a disease. It's an additional concern once you're consulting about your health din, no?
Yeah, and focusing on medical concern, kung titingnan naman talaga, LGB individuals require similar health needs as heterosexual people. Wala namang pagkakaiba physically as far as general health is
Hindi
concerned.
naman stronger just because you're gay, as much as we'd want that, no?
As much as we want that, no? Pero, the thing lang kasi na namamagnify is that LGB youths are at an increased risk for sexually transmitted infections because they tend to engage in more sexual intercourse with more partners. So, nasi-stereotype to at nasi-stigmatize.
Yeah, kasi I don't think, as much as outdated siya na paniniwala, no, may narinig pa rin tayo na people believe na if you have HIV/AIDS, it's because you're gay. It's because you're not heterosexual. And yung naging factor yun as to why people don't want to get treated or are hesitant to get treated kasi natatakot sila dun sa stigma na marireceive nila, na sabihin na baka i-judge sila, baka pag-usapan sila pag-uwi ng mga healthcare workers, diba? Kasi stigma is a very damaging, distressing thing. Tapos dadagdag pa yun sa health concerns mo, mahirap to get like consultation and medication for it.
And even if the data suggests that gay individuals in particular are more likely to be sexually active with increases in the likelihood of them being exposed to HIV, HPV, hepatitis, even if may ganung data, it's still not correct to generalize it. Now,
Tama.
all LGBT people are bound to acquire these diseases.
And they're not the only ones naman to acquire those illnesses,
Yeah,
diba?
yeah.
It doesn't discriminate.
Yeah, and no one is helped by forwarding these kinds of negative health perspectives.
Ang mahirap din kasi with these health perspectives is once you're LGB, once you've like accepted that as your identity, limited din yung resources on how to protect yourself from these illnesses, mga sexually transmitted illnesses and diseases. Kasi I would say a lot of the sex education that you do get, they're very heteronormative pa rin din eh. It's always in the lens of a guy having sexual intercourse with a girl.
Yeah.
Walang what about a girl who has sexual intercourse with another girl, a guy who has sexual intercourse with another guy. Like, nasan yung accessibility of those resources and education for those people, di ba?
Yeah, and baka mas nakaka-heighten nun yung curiosity of people or perhaps recklessness to pursue these behaviors kasi nga, hindi sila well-informed about these things. But another factor that na kailangan nating pag-usapan, especially in these times, is of course, mental health, no? Nabanggit mo kanina yung therapy. Definitely mental health is also a concern because individuals who conceal, yung pagtatago ng sexual orientation, they experience a unique stress na nagko-cause sa kanila ng problems like depression, even anxiety. And these people na nakakaramdam ng mga ganitong karanasan, they are at higher risk for suicide, ideation, and attempt. And even substance use and abuse.
Sobrang nakakalungkot, no? Pero, it's not surprising, unfortunately, kasi ganun na kadami yung stress mo. How do you deal with it with no support, halos, or minimal support? Talagang doon ka pupunta sa more harmful na practices. Yun nga yung abuse, substance abuse, and depression and anxiety. Well, ano bang in-expect pa natin if society tells you you're wrong, di ba? Or parang your identity is not welcome dun sa mga circles na dating kasama mo.
Yeah. And, just to name a few, other things then na associate to mental health concern include eating disorders, violence, abuse, and other forms of harassment.
Yeah, pero alam mo, ang isa ding pwedeng mag-contribute sa negative mental health and isa din challenge para sa mga LGB adolescents is yung social class, so socio-economic status or SES. It's always an issue kasi this brings us to the discourse of, yun nga, like I mentioned earlier, intersectionality, wherein different dimensions of oppression result in unique experiences of the oppressed. Hindi naman lahat ng members ng LGB community equal ng...
Pare-pareho.
Oo, tama. Hindi kami like para same lang experiences dahil lang we're all like parang not heterosexual, di ba? Some people well, some members of the LGB community are women, identify as women. Some naman are from a lower social class than those who have resources to siguro better like counselors, therapists who can help them deal with their experiences. Paano kung wala kang resources or wala kang access to those? Paano mo na-navigate the experience mo? Talagang you're at a disadvantage na agad because of your SES.
Yeah, kasi SES talaga is, it moderates or it greatly influences an individual's access to resources.
Actually, pati yung mga insults na iniisip natin, yung bakla at tomboy, they don't only represent yung SO or sexual orientation and gender expression, pero kahit yung economic status na din ng mga individual, yung tomboy, low income na masculine na lesbian, yung bakla naman low income na feminine na gay man. Doon natin narinig yung mga insults na yun, di ba? Kasi usually, unfortunately, pag nakita natin na someone is more, well, they appear to be of a higher SES, parang mas hesitant i-label sila as bakla or tomboy, di ba?
And it's harder to ridicule them kasi nagkakaroon din ng power dynamics between people with higher and lower SES.
Yeah, and isa ding like dagdag dun sa SES, 'di ba? Yung income na nadadala natin sa ating family, yung pag-contribute natin sa income nila, yung income na yon, it's a big factor as to whether or not they're going to gain acceptance from the family. Syempre naman, if you're a breadwinner, if you're bringing like, tama, marami kang nalibre mo yung mga kapatid mo, na-treat out mo yung parents mo, they may want to, or they may be motivated na i-accept ka kasi nakakatulong ka naman, di ba? Pero paano naman yung mga na-view as quote-unquote hindi nakakatulong?
Yeah.
Parang dagdag problema pa yung sexual orientation nila, no? So, intersectionality talaga is a big thing talaga na we have to grapple with. It's not just, hindi mo siya mahiwalay. Hindi siya na, this is my identity as, for example, a bisexual woman, and this is my identity as someone of this social class. They interact talaga. Ayun, so sinabi nga natin, di ba, na yung earning capacity, protective factor siya, that shields the individual from rejection, and it may not readily apply to LGB adolescents kasi you don't earn naman as a student. Pero it forwards yun nga, the idea of intersectionality. When we talk about development, yung magiging influence niya, ikaw ba, Czarru, like, how do you think SES interacts with yung SO development and acceptance ng isang LGB adolescent?
I think aside sa mga nabanggit na natin, a part of it is also going to come back to a person's educational attainment. Kasi kapag ka hindi mataas, hindi ko naman generalize, pero kapag ka kasi mas mataas yung educational attainment mo, maaaring mas informed ka about more correct views, perspectives, and beliefs.
Kasi may access
Kasi may access ka sa information, to education, no? And well, it also is seen naman na people with higher educational attainment tend to have more liberal stances on things. And perhaps mas accepting sila when it comes to conversations regarding LGBTQI individuals.
Tama. And well, this is more of we may not think that this is an intersectional issue or may influence yung SES, pero na-realize ko lang din, na people of a lower SES, maybe hindi sila nag-look through yung media na kino-consume nila. Is yung media na readily available, mga nakita natin sa ABS-CBN, GMA, and yung portrayal ng mga queer like individuals doon, it's very clear-cut na parang one certain thing lang, no? So yung nga, less access to more representation that they may identify with and may help them figure out their identity kasi alala ko, when I was figuring out my identity, yung access sa Western media that do talk about yung different identities, it helped me realize na, okay, normal yun. It's something na, it's just a normal thing na it's not like parang a problem kasi these people are existing as characters with those diverse, so GSC. Pero, kasi dito parang more of, although there are steps being made na nakita natin yung, it's just a part of their identity, it's just a part of who they are. Lagi nakita natin yung mga characters na completely ganun lang talaga. If sabing bakla, ganun talaga yung itsura niya. And if hindi tayo fit, baka nga isipin na, okay, so hindi ako ganito or dapat hindi ko accept yung ganito, so ibig ba sabihin hindi ito yung identity ko?
Yeah, and when it comes to topics regarding representation, yung thing kasi is, parang kapag ka may LGBTQI topic that a certain media delves into, kailangan SPG agad yung representation. Hindi ba pwedeng like G naman?
Kailangan laging yung hindi pwede manood yung mga bata, kailangan tulog ng mga bata bago tayo manood. And actually, yung na-mention mo din about yung liberal like stances, na-mention din kasi dun sa isang class namin in psych na if you're of a lower SES, if you're part of the working class kasi, nasanay ka na you have to go with ano sinasabi ng authority. Kasi if you don't, less yung chances mo, less yung opportunities mo pag inaway mo yung teacher mo, inaway mo yung boss mo, direct yung effect sa'yo, mawawalan ka ng opportunities, di ba? So, nasanay yung mga tao of a lower SES na okay, sumunod na lang ako sa sinasabi ng authority. And if the authority says na mali maging bakla, mali maging tomboy, ano pang iisipin nila? Mali talaga. Instead na mawalan sila ng opportunities, di ba? Kasi they don't have the liberty na to be that, I guess, open about their identity kasi baka mawalan sila ng trabaho.
Yeah, and this only demonstrates how challenges compound, no? These are compounding issues that contribute to a larger challenge of how to deal with sexuality, especially during adolescence. So we've talked about the development of sexual orientation and the difficulties that LGB adolescents might face regarding their identity formation and acceptance, relationships with families and peers, no, health, and of course, social class. But of course, we won't just be talking about issues. Di ba, Jay? Hindi naman puro issue lang.
Puro negative lang.
Hindi naman.
Siyempre naman magbibigay tayo ng mga suggestions or solutions that we can give for these issues or problems. Although, baka hindi siya super applicable para sa lahat, you know, at least meron tayong options. Options, yes.
Yes.
Pero, ayun, dapat nagbibigay din tayo ng, ano ba, hope para dun sa mga ating mga
this
listeners.
Is something that people can solve.
And historically have solved.
Yes.
We have persisted
Correct.
talaga.
Kaya, again, it is very important to also talk about those. So to our dear listeners, see you in part 2.
Ayan, so welcome back to the 170 podcast where we're discussing the development of sexuality in LGB youth and adolescents. So in the first part, we discussed the developmental concerns that might come up for adolescents and also the why and how the experience of LGB youths may be unique.
Right, but of course, we don't want to have this episode just be about the negatives. Kailangan we also take the time to suggest any possible solutions that you as adolescents who might find yourselves in this situation can take, or maybe if you're not an adolescent, no, what steps can be made to help LGB adolescents in different settings.
Ayan, so first of all, like we'll start about the fact na, yun nga, na-mention natin kanina, adolescence, it can be a stressful period for adolescents, for anyone actually. Pero LGB adolescents, they may also have to deal with minority stress. So yung minority stress, ano siya? Yung stress na naramdaman ng mga tao just because they're members of a minority. So sexual minority, yung pagiging LGB, that can contribute to minority stress. And one way to deal with this minority stress is for LGB adolescents to receive and perceive support from important groups around them. Hindi pwede na sinasabi ng mga tao around them, oh, we support them naman, pero hindi na nararamdaman.
Totoo.
Hindi
Kailangan maayos yung support at nararamdaman nila.
Oo, yung obvious, hindi yung sinasabi mo lang na, support naman kita, pero your actions say differently or they're very hidden. That's not support. It doesn't feel like support to these adolescents.
Yeah. But Jay, anong mga groups ba are we talking about?
Actually, one example of these groups is yung schools na ina-attendan nila. So, yung example of how some schools may show support is yung pag-establish ng gay-straight alliance. Medyo...
Wow, gay-straight alliance.
Yes, medyo nagpapakita ka ng age, pero honestly, I hadn't had this experience when I was in high school. My gosh, I sound so old. Pero I have heard... Ay nako, Czarru, we're the same age.
Okay, anyway.
Pero yun, anyway, I've heard examples from my siblings, my younger siblings, na meron na din palang nagpa-pop up ng mga gay-straight alliance even in the Philippines. And they show na yung school, safe siya and diverse for sexual minority students. Accepted yung identities nila. Ikaw ba, Czarru, have you experienced something like this? Na yung gay-straight alliance? Pakita ka din ng age mo nga.
Well, Jay, actually, wala akong experience with it. Pero in my school kasi, when LGB individuals band together, parang hindi naman siya pinupolice ng school.
Tama.
And then, hindi ko lang alam how it happens na na-integrate yung straight people into this.
Yeah, actually, syempre, walang personal experience din. Pero, from my siblings' experience, na don't worry, I have asked na she's very comfortable in talking about it din naman. It's a way for, yun nga, people do identify as allies of the LGBT community and they want to help. And some of this help can be in, yun nga, joining organizations where they're also they're co-members with people who identify as LGBTQ actually, but since we're focusing on this episode on LGB adolescents, and yun yung silang sabay ang gumagawa ng mga projects, naglalabas ng mga pubmas, for example, on social media, that help educate the public about diverse OGSC. So, pero hindi lang naman yung peers ang important sa school na magpakita ng support. Yung support na nakita sa school settings, pwede din galing sa teachers and yung school staff, yung administration mismo.
Of course.
Yung visible and obvious na support, hindi lang siya actually sa, I've heard an example of a very stressful experience for LGBT adolescents is yung dress codes na pwedeng, it can just be catering to the heteronormative society. Pero aside from that, yung bullying, unfortunately, di ba, prevalent issue pa rin siya, especially in adolescents. Kasi yung identity and yung crisis and all that like development that's going on, it may lead some adolescents to let go of this stress in a harmful way, not just for themselves but for others. So, yung bullying instances, pag narinig na natin yung bakla tomboy, teachers can help in those situations by intervening, by saying na, ay, hindi yan okay, or educating those who are bullying as to why it's not okay.
And you know, when we talk about bullying, it's a phenomenon na in all contexts ay hindi naman talaga dapat nangyayari.
Tama.
But we have to recognize that there needs to be special attention given to the kind of bullying that centers on LGB experiences.
Tama, kasi one of the, well, quote-unquote reasons ng mga bullies for bullying in the first place is because people are different. And what is more different than someone who doesn't fit into the heteronormative society,
Yeah.
di ba? Especially if yun nga, the common opinion, or at least for me growing up, nung narinig ko is straight dapat, or straight talaga yung experience. Yung pagiging diverse or open about your SOGSC, we're glad to see it happen, pero before, I don't think it was that prevalent. And it's a source of bullying talaga.
And madali kasing i-play off yung experience na, ay, asaran lang naman yan. O kaya, normal lang naman kasi yan.
It's something that everyone goes through naman yung asara na yan. Sometimes people just do it kasi they don't know how to express their affection for someone.
Yeah.
Narinig na natin yun eh.
And meron kasing asara na asaran lang talaga.
Mhm.
Pero merong asaran na ridicule na.
May asaran between friends. May asaran between people who really want to hurt other people.
Yeah.
And I think teachers, or for the most part, some teachers, they can pick up on that. School staff, they can pick up on that. And research has supported the idea that mental health concerns of LGB adolescents, they can be better addressed if teachers intervene during these bullying instances. Especially na yun nga, part sila ng minority eh.
And there needs to be recognition from people of authority. Siyempre, pag school, yung authorities dyan would be our teachers, ayan, our admin. So, maganda. No, it's a good message that we are sending out if these people or these authorities are able to actively and concretely show support for these students or adolescents na may pinagdadaanan when it comes to their sexual development.
Kasi we need to be consistent, di ba? When we say our school is a safe space or a safe zone, it should be safe for everyone, hindi lang certain people. So, yung concrete na actions na nagagawa ng mga teachers, malaking tulong yun para sa, not just LGB adolescents, but everyone. But, ayun nga, since LGB adolescents may be at a higher risk of being bullied by their peers, it's a big factor in promoting yung positive mental health sa kanila.
Yeah, and speaking of concrete solutions, babalik tayo sa usapin na ito as psych majors.
Yes, all about us, all about the degree.
All about psychology talaga ito. Pero totoo naman kasi na one solution that people can access or hopefully can access would be counseling and therapy. Kasi sometimes talaga you need help to process what you're going through.
Tama. You know, therapy, it's been stigmatized talaga na people think you only seek therapy when there's quote-unquote something wrong
When
with
something
you.
gravely wrong is
Tama,
going on
when
with
you're, ayoko naman sabihin to, pero yung pag nasisiraan daw ng bait, you know,
Yeah.
unfortunately, yun yung perspective. Pero, you know, therapy can help you navigate those experiences, di ba, Czarru?
Yeah, and when we talk about therapy, madaming klase ng therapy. And there's, for example, CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. There are also other psychotherapeutic strategies that can be used to help address declining mental health once they're placed in the experiences of our LGB adolescents. And kung ano mang klase ng therapy yung magandang kunin mo or i-access mo, this is something that you can definitely talk about with your therapist. Kasi it's an active process din.
Yeah, kasi, well, therapy is different for everyone, especially
Of course.
for different patients, for different therapists. Pero yung pagiging accepting kasi ng therapist mo, if you can be honest about your stressors and your struggles, being from the fact na you're of a diverse SOGSC, malaking tulong na makaka-address din yung therapist kasi it's part of yung struggles mo eh. Pag hindi mo na share yung struggle na yun, paano ka makatutulungan about that, di ba? Pero we do acknowledge na unfortunately, may mga instances na therapy may not be that accepting for LGBTQ adolescents. So, ano ba, Czarru, yung naiisip natin na bakit need na maging LGBTQ affirmative or na-place sa mga context ng LGBTQ individuals yung therapy?
Oo. So mahalaga na yung therapist mismo or yung counselor mo ay informed at positive ang stance towards non-heterosexual sexual orientation is because kapag ka ganoon sila, they can help affirm the identity of sexual minority youths and reduce their self-directed thoughts of hate. Yung mga negative thoughts na naiisip ng isang LGB adolescents, paano yon matatanggal ng isang therapist kung piniperpetuate mismo ng therapist or ng counselor yung negative thoughts na yun.
Parang siya pa yung naging source of stress. Pumunta ka sa therapy to help unload that stress. Nadagdagan ka lang ng stress,
I
di
think
ba?
that's not what they signed up for.
Tama. I came here to have a good time. Honestly, feeling so attacked right now.
But it's really important for these people to not feel that they do not fit the standard, Kasi nga sexual minority na sila, tapos i-emphasize pa natin, lalo pa nating ipaparamdam sa kanila na minority sila.
Tama. And I guess one way na pwedeng matutunan ng mga therapists na to yung, ganun nga, yung affirmative na practices for the people who do seek help from them is yung education about it. Pero honestly, baka hindi pa ganun ka-widespread yung education. So, paano nga ba naman na magiging affirmative yung mga LGBTQ therapists?
Siguro, ang mahalaga na lang dito is that we should push for the contextualization of strategies na talagang dapat lapat sila doon sa karanasan at pagkatao ng mga LGB individuals. Baka naman kasi LGB individual nga yung kausap ng therapist, pero yung approach na pang straight.
Tama, yung parang, well, do you see, pag tinatanong parang, are you doing risky relationship practices, ganun ba? Tapos tatanungin sa'yo, do you want to get married ba when you have this relationship? Paano mo naman sasagot yun as an LGBTQ individual?
Especially here in the Philippines.
Exactly. It's not legalized. Why would that ever be a thought in your head, di ba? Pero, ayun, yun din kasi na, as personally, as someone who did parang go to therapy, I'm not ashamed of that at all. You shouldn't be, by the way. Pero malaking tulong yung naging honest ko completely about it. And na yung therapist mo, open din na, oh yeah, that's okay. They don't treat it as parang, hala, we should also address the concern of your homosexuality as if it's an issue, diba? Kasi it's not. And dealing with that or dealing with yung more negative thoughts mo about your identity, well, personally, I know it did help with my anxiety and depression, how to deal with it. It helped me accept na since okay na may identity ko, it's one less source of yung stress na dumadagdag dun sa mental health problems ko.
And the help that you can receive from these services can include helping you navigate your coming out experience and the other experiences that may come after coming out, and process the stressful events that happened to you. Ikaw ba, Jay? Do you remember your coming out experience?
Depende kung kaninong coming out experience. Kasi like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of coming out processes na we do. May rehearsal with friends, may rehearsal with siblings. Pero I remember nga din na yung stressful talaga is when I came out to my parents. Kasi, like we said, yung parents, malaking factor talaga sila. And unfortunately, hindi completely positive out the door yung coming out experience ko. It was more of, sure ka ba? Maybe it's just a phase. pagkakamali yan, medyo may ganong na angle. And honestly, I do think na with my experience with therapy, like later on, and looking back on my coming out experience now, if I had someone who was trained to help me navigate that experience, it would have been a less stressful experience for me. Siyempre, hindi ma-erase na magiging stressful pa rin yung experience or yung reception ng mga tao. Pero yung pag-navigate, yung just figuring it out, contextualizing it, trying to make sense of it, if someone is trained to help you with that, malaking tulong yun sa mental health mo.
Yeah, definitely. Especially since minsan lost ka talaga and you needed that support from someone else. And it just so happens na you sought therapy. But if hindi na reward yung pag-approach mo sa therapy by receiving the help you actually need, parang baka hindi ka na mag-approach into the same kinds of services in the future.
Tama. Pero ikaw ba, Zar, think of coming out. Parang ako lang naman yung nagkwento dito. Ikaw ba, parang kamusta yung coming out experience mo? If you're comfortable.
Well, for me, it wasn't stressful. Parang, it was an episode, and then after it passed, okay na. Although when I say okay, I don't know how much okay is.
Hindi mo siya completely masabi na, it was fine.
Yeah, parang, it's still a work in progress even afterwards. Which I guess is something na hindi naman na may iwasan because in all aspects of identity, it's always going to be a work in progress. But the same can also be said when it comes to your social relationships. But siguro, ayun nga, mas may feeling lang of unrest when it comes to coming out and what happens afterwards. Kasi hindi mo talaga ma-pinpoint if okay na or if you need to be more on guard or if you're receiving less welcome and acceptance.
Kasi the coming out experience, it can really be stressful, no?
Yeah.
There are a lot of questions running through your mind. Mahirap nga siyang i-address on your own, which is why it's important for counselors to also, hindi lang yung i-help ka i-navigate, but in certain appropriate situations, they can also intervene to create these social supports for these sexual minority youth sa families nila and sa environment surrounding them kasi part pa rin naman yun ng social support mo eh. All of that is our social support and we would feel better if there's support coming from yung different dimensions or environments that we interact with. And these studies, they also support that both peer and family support, they're important to help improve mental health. Hindi pwedeng isa lang. Siyempre, mas gusto natin yung pareho silang positive or parehong nakakatulong sa mental health natin, di ba?
Yeah, and kanina nga napag-usapan natin na malaki yung challenges that LGB youths face when it comes to their families and peers. And of course, may impact ito to their mental health.
Speaking of family, no, one form of that family support, yun nga, like we mentioned, I mentioned sa coming out experience ko, it's from our parents. Which is why, if there are any parents that are listening to this, one way that you can support your children or other LGB adolescents that you may interact with or care for is through being more open-minded and open to reflecting and accepting that you may have possible pre-existing biases towards issues surrounding the topic of sexual identity. Siyempre, understanding naman tayo sa fact na our parents, our guardians, they may have grown up in a different environment.
Different time,
Tama.
different era.
Yes. We're acknowledging that and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also nothing wrong in acknowledging nga na, yeah, because I grew up in this time, because I grew up in this environment, ganito yung view ko. But you can be honest with your children or the people you care for na, okay, maybe this is different to me, maybe this is something na I haven't exactly interacted with personally, this is my first time, and maybe I do have biases that I need to think about, need to grapple with. Pero being honest about that and being accepting about that, that's the first step into accepting your child din or the LGB adolescents that you do care for, di ba?
Yeah, and syempre, parents also value and want their children to be able to trust, in the first place, that they will be met with support once they do come out. Well, kung talagang priority mo as a parent na may paramdam yung support.
And most
sa child
parents
mo.
naman talaga.
And hopefully most parents
Yes,
naman talaga.
oo.
But even before it happens, so in one way that parents can build this trust is to be open and understanding about other issues. For example, political issues that your children may discuss with you so as for them to feel safer around and about their coming out experience. Kasi yung communication and relationship between parents and child, hindi naman ito bigla na lang magsasprout from one experience. Diba? It's something that is cultivated and developed between them throughout their years. Yes, as a development
psychology student. Pero yeah, like you mentioned, no, gusto natin well, we're hoping that most parents hope na their children can feel safe and they're trusted enough na their children do want to come out or be honest about their identity. Pero hindi yun mangyayari kung walang trust in the first place. Yung isang example na naisip ko, like, maybe, well, let's drink responsibly. Pero once adolescents do try to explore that, no, yung issue na, do I want to try drinking, for example? If parents are open to the idea, for example, na hindi siya completely na hindi mo yan pwede gawin.
There's autonomy
Yeah.
naman, no?
If there's autonomy naman given to these children or these adolescents.
She has children.
Children, as an old, charot. Pero if there's autonomy given to these adolescents, mas may maiisip nila na, oh, okay, so hindi pala ganun super ka-strict or hindi siya na if I go against something or hindi ako nag-follow dun sa very strict or rigid instructions na binigay nila, they won't talk to me. Yung trust na yon, yung understanding then, even if children tuloy, even if adolescents make mistakes, parang yung conversations na, okay, we understood why you made this mistake and these are your consequences, pero we still love and support and trust you. If you cultivate that environment at home, baka mas willing, or hindi naman so willing, but more confident ang mga adolescents to come out to you and to feel secure in the coming out process, di ba?
And we want to stamp here the idea that being supportive parents positively impacts the mental health of adolescents, and it helps mitigate the self-hate that sexual minority adolescents may feel towards themselves because they are different.
Well, as much as we want to say nga na it's no different than their heterosexual peers, it's just that society has made it that they are different. Unfortunately, nothing wrong with being different. I think everyone is different in their own way. Pero yung different na sinasabi natin dito, it's more of, negative connotations, unfortunately. Pero yun, from personal experience din kasi, yung isang angle na pwede natin din pag-usapan is yung religious institutions. Kasi we're a predominantly Catholic country, di ba?
Yeah.
I mean, mga holidays natin, they revolve around Catholic holidays. We see a lot of churches na when we pass by, it's not a surprising fact.
So, an important part then is mas ma-cultivating greater acceptance, no, from this dimension.
Well, yeah, syempre we want that acceptance din talaga from personal experience. Kasi as someone who's religious, but also part of a sexual minority, there are people who may have grown up religious or found importance in religion, pero they're grappling with how difficult it is to manage that, along with realizations about yung sexual orientation. Like we mentioned earlier, paano ako magiging quote-unquote good Catholic or good Christian while also acknowledging na, oh, diverse yung SOGSC ko. So, yung isang specific na impact on religious LGB adolescents' mental health is yung tinatawag na psych-ache.
Psych-ache.
Yes! A new term siguro for us. Pero yung psych-ache, it's defined as this intolerable emotional suffering that comes across because of the internalized heterosexism that they have. Or yung need to fit into heterosexual standards na obviously hindi naman na-fit ng isang member of a sexual minority, di ba?
Yeah. But is this can we describe psych-ache also as a tension that they feel?
Yeah, we can definitely describe it as a tension that they may feel, diba? Kasi nga, yun yung, they're trying to figure out na, well, some people, spend their entire lives thinking, or finding their identity and their religion, and then pagdating ng adolescent, maybe for some, biglang may identity na contradicting, no? So talaga may tension there. So, what may be interesting though is, despite the fact na the words we're using, very negative, tension, conflict, lack of acceptance, psych-ache, oo nga. Yung term pala, diba, it makes you think na yung religious institutions, they're contributing something very negative to the identity development of LGB adolescents. Pero, what's interesting is, there's a way for minority stress to be mitigated through positive religious coping. So ano nga ba yun, Czarru, yung positive religious coping?
Well, Born and colleagues describe positive religious coping as having a more secure relationship with one's religion. So an example of this is finding a church that is open and welcoming to sexual minorities. Using these strategies to cope has been linked to positive physical and mental health even in sexual minorities. On the other hand, meron din naman na negative religious coping, which is not having that secure relationship with religion, and may be seen in LGB youths defining stressors they experience as punishment for being part of a sexual minority. And this has been linked to emotional distress. So yung key takeaway lang dito is that you need to find a religious group na belong ka. At
Tama.
comfortable ka.
Actually, from personal experience, it's all about me.
All about you talaga to, Jay.
And this might sound like a lie, pero I do have a friend na help me navigate yung religious identity ko along with yung identity ko as part of a sexual minority. It's very uplifting talaga to hear from someone who may not be part of a sexual minority pero is able to contextualize yung existence mo as belonging pa rin dun sa religion, belonging pa rin dun sa church, for example, na hindi siya completely different, na i-incorporate mo siya. So yun yung sasabi natin positive religious coping, di ba? Finding people who do support yung identity mo while also being part of the religion pa rin. Like, hindi siya yung completely na kailangan mong mag-give up ng isang part of your identity.
Yeah. And while positive religious coping is something we want to encourage, negative religious coping naman, on the other hand, is something that people are encouraged to help LGB youths reduce in order to lower the psyche that they may be feeling.
Siyempre, ayaw naman natin nung negative religious coping ina-encourage natin.
Yeah. So, parang given naman na increase the positive and reduce the negative.
Ayaw naman natin i-view na pag nagka-stressor ang isang LGB adolescent, for example, like bumagsak sa exam, isipin niya na, kasalanan ko kasi this is my identity and this is a punishment from God.
No, definitely not.
Oo, especially if we're viewing religion as something as a loving institution, di ba? So yeah, definitely religious coping, there's a way na you can have both yung religion mo and your identity kasi, well, naging religious na, na preaching, pero
You are listening.
you are listening to. Pero, yeah, definitely surprising, no? Baka surprising sa mga listeners natin. Pero there is a way na your religion can help with your minority stress that you're feeling. Even if it's something that people may say is a sin. There's a way to still have a secure attachment to your religion. And what's important to note though is, ito yung positive religious coping, it can only work if may social support din ng LGB youth from other places. So, paano ba natin makuha yung social support na yun? It involves providing LGB youth with resources that offer this support. So, religious man ito, or more in the forms of groups or organizations that have sexual minority members or help sexual minority members navigate their unique experiences. Kasi there are older members who may have already gone through these experiences that can help guide the younger members, di ba?
So this brings us back na naman to that positive socialization that LGB adolescents need to achieve.
Kasi it's a big, nagdagdag siya. You have your support from your peers, you have your support from your family, maybe your school and religion din hopefully, pero having that shared experience with other members of the LGBTQ community, dagdag din siya na social support kasi you really feel na, well, hopefully you will really feel na you belong. And they help provide individuals with coping strategies that they may also try out as individuals to help cope with the stress that they may be feeling. Kasi, pag-usapan natin, maraming sources ng stress na to. Pwedeng yung policies na people put in place, the governments put in place. And if walang concrete laws or policies na
That support their needs and
exactly,
experiences.
oo. Hindi naman siya na yung lack na parang walang laws na put in place na to help these people or parang help lessen discrimination. Meron ding the fact na hindi sila acknowledged at all in these systems. Kailangan talaga yung individual coping strategies, and who more to teach that than people who have already gone through this, di ba? So, ano ba yung coping strategies na pinasabi natin, Czarru? Do you have like any idea what that might be?
Well, it just so happens that I do. And to help with that, Tumi and colleagues identified 3 categories of individual coping strategies. And dadaanan natin sila isa-isa ng very, very light. So number 1, it says na alternative seeking strategies involve seeking alternatives. For example, an LGB youth or adolescent, yung friends nila hindi supportive. E di, alangan namang mag-stick sila to these people who aren't supportive of them. So, of course, the goal is maging supportive din yung people na yan in the long run. But if that doesn't work out, syempre, hanap ka ng alternative. Explore other social circles na maaring mas accepting.
Nothing wrong naman with exploring the alternatives, di ba?
Of course. Well, why would you stick, diba, to something that's unhealthy and that's not working for you?
Yeah, it's not your fault if you're in a situation that's harmful for you. Don't ever feel na you need to like adjust na ikaw yung mali. You can also look for things that make you feel better about yourself, di ba? Yun yung alternative seeking strategies.
Yeah, and although this might not this might not apply as readily to adolescents, pero even in work, if it doesn't work kasi toxic yan when it comes to sexual minorities, hopefully you are able to find work that is more suitable for you.
Tama, pag red flag, iwan mo na yan.
Ay,
Red
tama,
flag nga, di ba?
Tama, red flag eh. Anyway, sige. So after seeking alternatives, no, we also have cognitive strategies on the other hand, which involves approaches like mindfulness. Familiar ka ba sa mindfulness, Jay?
Ay nako, hindi man halata if ever you know me IRL na yung stress na ramdaman ko. Pero I'm very familiar with mindfulness. It's a really helpful, maybe to some people who aren't like familiar with it or are trying it out for the first time. Medyo, it's a confusing, medyo different na experience. Pero once you get the hang of it, it's a very calming experience, no? Have you tried it ba din ba, Czarru?
I have. I've had a PE before. The
Yes.
mindfulness. And siguro yung idea lang is that when we think of mindfulness practice, maaari kasing it comes in the form of services like meditation and everything. But at the same time, it can also be a way of life that you apply in every step of your dailies. Like for example, naglalakad ka, kumakain ka, you can be mindful in those ways and it helps you be more in tune of yourself, which can perhaps help you navigate through feelings or uncertainties that relate to your sexual orientation.
Tama, being aware of everything you're feeling or everything
Yes.
surrounding you, ganun. Yun yung experience ko with mindfulness eh. And it really has helped kasi by acknowledgement na, okay, this is what I'm feeling and I'm acknowledging this feeling. And because I've acknowledged this feeling, medyo healthy na yung treatment ko of it. Hindi yung completely nagde-deny tayo na, ay hindi ko yung nararamdaman. So if we acknowledge na, okay, meron lang tayong stress na nararamdaman because we are part of a sexual minority, maybe it will help us better navigate the fact that that is part of our identity and this is part of our experience.
And aside from alternatives and cognitive strategies, no, it was also found in research that LGBT-specific strategies, no, or those strategies that help connect individuals with LGBT groups, no, it was identified to have better impact on their psychological adjustment.
Tama. Kasi, well, hindi naman sinasadya, pero having LGBT friends, I would say, it's a malaking factor na nagpabuhat ng positive mental health ko and acceptance ko kasi these are people who are confident and secure in their own identities and they're not ashamed of it. So, mapapaisip ko din talaga na, dapat hindi din ako ashamed, di ba? Kasi these people I care for aren't ashamed.
Yeah, and when you find these groups, papasok na rin dyan yung positive peer support, papasok na rin dyan, perhaps you can find a role model, no?
Tama.
And be more informed about the experiences that similar others go through.
Yung nga sa mga LGBT groups, then this is how we find out para mga resources din, di ba? Like, although we do talk about the individuals, that does also lead to yung pwede natin makuhang resources, di ba?
Yeah, kaya Jay, alam mo, isa ka talagang resource para sa akin.
Wow! I wish I could reciprocate. Joke lang. Syempre,
Okay.
hindi. Syempre, ikaw, resource ka din. Yun nga, having friends, yes, friendship.
Okay.
Pero, ayun, although we do focus on that individual, may understanding pa rin naman na most of that stress or yung mga concerns or issues that we have as members of the LGBTQ community and at LGB adolescents may have, they may stem from systemic issues. Pero yun nga, we do recognize na although there are steps that our other members of the community are taking and are very brave for taking, to the yung pag-implement ng mga laws and policies and yung pag-change the system to better accommodate or help us, medyo matagal yun na process. So, syempre, we want to, as much as possible, deal with it. Kung kaya natin to deal with those stressors now, then let's do stuff that we can do para ma-deal with it now. Yung mga individual strategies.
Yeah. If hindi nga ngayon, kailan?
Tama. Kaya ngayon na, charot.
Now na!
And speaking of now na, ito na, we're reaching the end of
Now
our
na ba
podcast.
talaga yan?
Masyado kang clingy, Czarru.
Sorry. My bad.
Pero ayun nga, so in this episode, we've talked about yung coping strategies that individuals and yung people around them can use to help deal with the minority stress that LGB youths may be feeling. Of course, may understanding din tayo that not all of these strategies are necessarily effective for everyone or applicable for everyone, and may issue of resources that may not be as available to us in the Philippines due to a lot of different factors na na-mention na din natin kanina.
Yeah, pero sana naging clear nga, no? That despite the stress that we may feel because of our identities, especially our sexual orientation, no, it's not something to be ashamed of, and it's not something to hide.
Happy Pride!
Happy Pride!
So, sakto. Happy Pride nga naman. Pero yes, it does get better and it will get better. People have gone through this. Unfortunately, people have gone through this before, but fortunately, they have come out of it. Come out, yes!
Yes, in more ways than one.
Tama! Very thematic tayo for this episode.
And we hope na somehow we were able to equip you all with more resources on how to deal with our unique experiences. At sana nakatulong ang episode na ito hindi lamang sa pagpapalawak ng pangunawa natin sa karanasan ng mga kabataang lesbian, gay at bisexual, but also in encouraging you na mas pag-usapan pa ang mga danas, no, ang mga pinagdadaanan nilang ito. And if you are someone looking to support LGB adolescents, we hope you were able to also get an idea of what strategies can be done to help support them.
And of course, we do thank those people who do take their time to become allies of the community.
Yes.
It's a big help talaga. From 2 members of the community to everyone listening. Woo! To the allies. Thank you, allies. Pero,
Thank you.
Ayan, thanks for taking the time to listen to us today. Once again, this was the 170 Podcast. I'm Jay.
And I am Czarru.
Have a good day!
Thank you, everyone.
Happy Pride!